Okay. This is a section of the Dan River below the town of Madison. Madison was established in 1818 when the Roanoke Navigation Company started selling lots for sale to build a town. So 1818, Madison became a town. About the same time, the Roanoke Navigation Company, which was a company that was put together to, I guess, increase navigation and produce a viable network on the rivers between here and Danville to ship cargo of tobacco, molasses, wheat, flour, honey, whatever you can imagine that was being produced in the backcountries of Surrey, Stokes, Rockingham County. And this is before the advent of the railroad, or right around the time the railroad was in its infancy, so it wasn't that efficient. River travel was the most efficient form of travel back in those days. So here we have the Madison Sluice. In 1879, when the Corps of Engineers, Army Corps of Engineers, did a survey on the river just to see what was left of the original navigation structures that was created here, this sluice was still here. And today you can still see part of the sluice. Basically, this is a section of the river that is a shoal area, and a shoal is nothing more than a shallow area dominated by rocks and ledges, and basically it's a water hazard. Even today, if you get to the right shoal area, even a canoe can be flipped over, a kayak, you could get into some trouble. As you can see right now, we're in the middle of the river and we are standing in ankle-deep water. But if you step over here in the sluice area, it's going to be up to my waist. So you're talking about, you're going from, say, a foot of clearance from the riverbed to, say, 3 or 4 feet. All they've done in this section of river here, they haven't added anything to it. They've just used what nature had available and just modified it. So what they've done is they've taken rock out of this whole section here and have lined it up down through here on this side of the shoals, so that the water is funneled down a small section of river. Now that section of river can keep itself cleaned out. So if you've got a lot of water running through a small area, you're going to have that scouring effect on the ground. So it's going to constantly keep stuff pushed out of the way, which is good. Because then you wouldn't have to have as much work keeping the area clean or dredged for river traffic. Now what they would do is they would bring 30-foot, 40-foot boats upstream by poles. Sometimes they would have what's called a tow path on each side of the river. A tow path is just a long path that's open, and humans or animals like oxen, mules, or horses, or whatever they had available to them, would take a rope and they would pull this barge, is basically what it is a barge, upriver. There is what they call sweeps on front and back of these barges. So you can have somebody pulling, similar to a sailboat's operation. When a sail, when you get in the wind from the side, you got a keel that pushes against it and it makes it go the boat forward due to lateral resistance. So you could take those sweeps and adjust the sweeps, and you can actually have somebody walking along and you've got enough tension that you're constantly going along with them, and yet they are almost side by side to you. This section here, I don't know if it had a tow path or not. You've got to realize that we're looking at this from 200 years into the future from when they had put this stuff in, and I don't know what the river looked like. Obviously, I don't see 200-year-old trees standing along the river. However, the river fluctuates. It's in a state of flux all the time. Major floods will wash stuff out. Dirt gets dumped in. Sand builds up on the banks. So I really don't know what the river looked like in this area. I do know that if you go upstream past the 704 bridge, 704-311 bridge, that's going to be the port was up there. And the port is basically, it's probably a landing. because I haven't seen any historical record that there was actually a port. Now, that was a true port, and there was also a port in Milton, Virginia, and in Danville. Danville has the most extensive canals and sluice channels. We'll study that at some point. We may even go to Danville. I don't know if we'll put the boats in at Danville, but we'll definitely go and look around. A lot of the sluices and the canals in Danville actually made canals. Now, a canal is different from a sluice. So a sluice you're in the same body of water. So this would be a sluice because we're in one body of water. We're only fixing it for river traffic to go down. This is considered a wing dam. Wing dams were structures that was put in the water, and what it does is it pushes the water toward what you want to push the water toward. So a wing dam here is coming off at the side, so the water is constantly being pushed over this way, and what it does is it keeps the river level in this sluice higher. I've been here in 2007. We had a major drought in this county, and I was able to take pictures of this sluice right here during that drought. And this section I'm standing in now, even though I'm in a foot of water, was completely above water. But the sluice still had 3 or 4 feet of water in it because all the water is being diverted into that area. So it's primitive, but it's effective and it works. And once you put this in, it's not a lot of maintenance that you have to do to it. So this type of river structure here was very prevalent. It was very easy to do. You didn't need a lot of manpower. And once it's in place, it's in place. 200 years ago, they started, and it's still here. And it still works, just like they did. Now, what I do need to tell you is I don't know how high above water these structures were back in the day, back in 1818 when they first put them in. So, yes, we're standing on it, and we can definitely tell it's man-made. There's several stuff here, rocks that are end to end, and you can obviously see where it's been created, but I don't know how high above water it was when they initially put it in. Now, we talked about a canal in Roanoke. Now, a canal connects 2 bodies of water. So Roanoke had canals that would go around the river, go through a basin. They created a basin, and they had, it was massive, and you could turn these boats all the way around, and it was deep. In the 1980s, I remember reading an article from Roanoke Times maybe, that they were doing some construction, and they were digging down, and you know, the river changes course all the time, and not just this river, but all rivers. And the basin had silted in to the point nobody used it anymore. Nobody was keeping it maintained, so it just basically just faded away, I guess, into obscurity. Well, when they were building some buildings on the edge of the river, they found the basin, and they said there was boats stacked on top of each other under the mud. You'll read reports from old newspaper clippings in the 1800s, 1700s, where they described major freshets, and that's what we would call a flood. Water would race down, they would overturn boats, it would sink boats. You got to realize these boats weren't made to last forever. They were made of sawn wood. They were made to a dimensional standard, and that's what all of this stuff, river structure, is designed to do, is to push a boat 30 to 40 feet up and down river. There were some longer boats, I'm sure, and there was also some shorter boats. It depended on who built the boat. But the locks, there's locks on the river down on Eagle Island, and we'll go visit those one day. Most of those structures, unfortunately, are gone. However, you can see the engineering difficulties that they would have to move boats up and over sections of water with rocks in it like this. Now, I noticed that the bridge for the railroad is right up here. It's around the bend on the river, and that was pretty much the end of the navigable portions of this river. It didn't go no further. They called Madison the head of navigation because Madison was the last point on this stop. It's kind of like when you have a train. So a train would get to the very end point of the rails. There's nowhere else to go at that point, so they just put the train in reverse and drove it back. So either they would put the train would either drive basically in reverse back to where it came from, or they would have a turntable, spin it around, and then head it back. So Madison was the end of the hub of this navigation series on the water. Now that's not to say that people wouldn't use boats above the head of navigation. I think about a week or so ago, we was up on the Dan River above Lindsay Bridge and above the dam, and there was wing dams and there was sluices up there, but that was probably for farmers to get products from the upper reaches of the dam down to Madison. Now, the town itself, once the railroad came, you quit seeing boats come up and down the river. Structures like this, even though they would just fall into disrepair, people would, they know they're there, but they wouldn't. I mean, you know, it is what it is. Nobody's going to do anything. I'm sure it gave good fishing around structure like this. Even today, I'm going to try it. There's fish in this section right here, especially in that sluice way, pretty big sized fish. And they use this as structure for protection. Also, smaller fish will use this along with mollusks and freshwater clams and small little organisms. They use this as a home. And it's a lot of biodiversity here. I'll shoot some video of some of the fish underwater, the minnows, but structures go beyond just human needs and necessity. They provide home and structure for the animals that actually live here. So I think I'll see if we can do some fishing. Let me grab my fishing rod here, and we'll try it. Fishing today. What I'll be using today is an old Mitchell 300. This design around the early 1900s. I love it. I love old stuff. I love being able to restore items and use them on the river again. And frankly, it's just a quick little hobby. Now, the lure I'm using, let's see if I can get this down here. There we go. Is a standard inline lure, and it replicates a small trout. And yes, there have been trout found down in the lower reaches of the dam, but I've never caught one, especially around Danbury. Let's see if we can get something to bite. Oh, somebody's getting stopped up on the bridge. I can hear the patrol car. Oh, there he goes, there he goes. Come on. Now he followed that thing all the way halfway across the river. He wouldn't bite. So let's get it over there in that sluice way, around some of these rocks. Let's see if we can get a fish to strike. There he goes. No, backed off of it. You'll find that the fishing in this river is amazing. All kinds of panfish. You've got bluegill, obviously. You've got small little red ears. You've got pumpkin seed. My brother used to love to catch pumpkin seed. There's a fighting little fish. Minnows. You've got smallmouth bass. You've got largemouth bass that have escaped and basically found a home here. It's got good. Certain section of this river is more prone to those. Above Madison, above Lindsay Bridge, the area that we discussed the last time that's dammed up, that's a perfect environment for largemouth bass. The water's not too deep, but deep enough. It's warm, and it's got a lot of fish, and the banks are covered in a lot of vegetation, so there's a lot of stuff to eat. Whereas smallmouth, smallies, you'll hear them called, they like moving water, and they like a rocky bottom because that's what they use when they make their nests. You know, I've been fishing on this river for many years. This is this is a natural resource. It's funny how times change, and what I mean by that is, you know, back in the day, this river was so important to the people in the Dan River Valley for their livelihood. They take water from the river to drink. They take water from the river to irrigate their crops. They use the river, and they use their bateau and the river barges to transport their products to larger markets. And they would go up to Roanoke and Danville, not Roanoke, I'm sorry, Roanoke Navigation Company, but they would go up to Danville, and then from there, they would be shipped all over the world. So your tobacco that you grow, say, in a little farm up here in Rockingham can go worldwide because the river traffic. And river traffic today is very important in places like Tennessee, Mississippi, Louisiana. Obviously in the Mississippi River Basin, those large barges move inland freight. But here in the east and the southeast and in the South in general, you know, after the Civil War and Reconstruction, it fell to the railroads. And the railroads started moving more freight. And once the railroads, and let's face it, a railroad is probably, what's the word I want to use? Safer. It's definitely a safer way to transport stuff, and also more timely. More timely too, because you didn't have to worry about the weather. Which is, if you deal with the river, you got a lot of weather issues to worry about. You got floods, you've got droughts, all kinds of stuff. Whereas the railroad is a little more. There we go. There we go. Oh, we got it. These angry little fish. I couldn't even see what that is. I think it was a panfish. I'm not sure. Well, what we're doing here is we're casting toward the bank and letting the current push the lure around, and we let the lure sweep in front of the fish while they're sitting behind these rocks, and the fish will come out and snatch him. That's the theory. I can see small fish chasing. We got some more people paddling. Anyway, back to what I was talking about. You know, the importance of the river has changed. So it went from being an important navigation and shipping hub to now it's recreation. What we're doing now, these folks are doing here behind us. It went from, I guess it's still making money. So the river's always going to be here. Afternoon.
Hello.
How are y'all?
How are you? How you doing?
I'm pretty good. How are y'all?
Doing fine.
Y'all headed down to Eden or?
Yeah, down to Settle Bridge.
Settle Bridge. All right. Well, y'all be safe.
All right. Enjoy yourself.
Yes, ma'am. Piece of crockery. No telling how old that is. It looks like it's coated in something black on the inside. No. Let's put it back. Yeah, you don't want to be tampering with a lot of this stuff. down towards Shoal Sluice, and we'll discuss that and the history behind that and how it came into being. We'll discuss that. That's actually on the National Register of Historic Places. It's that important. This is something that's really important to me. This type of these river structures, these dams, sluices, and wing dams. I guarantee you, if you ask, if you had 100 people come up and down the river, I bet 90 plus would never even heard of this, even knows anything about it. And our history is just slowly going away from us. They're not teaching it anymore. People just don't. They're not interested in the old ways. Even though sometimes, I'm not saying the old ways are best, I'm saying it is just nice to understand what you're looking at from a historical perspective. Like this sluice. There's water in here all the time, even in droughts, because of the navigational structures that was made back in the 1800s. And people, they come down through here, they're headed, like those folks there, they're headed down to Settles Bridge. They're going to cross through Cross Rock Shoals, Sluice. There's also a section of the river we'll go down, it's called Long Island. Long Island was a ford. Oh, there he goes. Was a ford back in the 1700s. The road that led from there northward up into Virginia also connected a little place called Guilford Courthouse, which later became known as Greensboro, which was named after the Revolutionary War hero Nathaniel Greene. And Greensboro used to be spelled Greenensbouroughh, Borough, and they shortened it over the years to Borough, B-O-R-O, but it's still named after that man. Well, anyway, during that battle at Courthouse, Nathaniel Greene moved his men through that section of the river on their way out to Guilford Courthouse for the battle with Cornwallis. And that section of river is still there. It's still shallow enough, similar to this, and people would walk across it. You'll see a lot of, on maps, areas called fords. Shallow Ford, Baker's Ford, Hamlin's Ford. I'll try to go to Hamlin's today if I can. It's just sections of the river where a road would come down and people would able to cross. It wouldn't be dry land, but it would be where you could just roll your pant legs up, so to speak, and get across there. Naturally, bad weather, you wouldn't be able to cross. In the wintertime, it just made it difficult because the horses or the ox or the mules or whatever you're using pulling your stuff would, they'd be wet and then be cold, and it wouldn't be very beneficial to them. But most of the year, you just walk across the river, and people would go there and they would congregate there and picnic, and people would, speak to people who's coming through.